This is CBN NewsWatch.
And thanks for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Heather Sells. The president is slashing the number of refugees that the U.S. will admit just days after calling on the world to end religious persecution. The White House says it's setting the refugee admission ceiling for the next year at 18,000. That's down from 30,000 this year. The number has steadily declined during the Trump administration. In the last year of President Obama's presidency, it was 85,000. On Monday, the president actually focused on religious freedom, making a speech to the United Nations calling for an end to religious persecution. But when it comes to providing a safe haven for those fleeing persecution, the administration is shifting. It says the problem is the southern border and keeping up with asylum cases there. By cutting back on refugees, officials can address the backlog at the border.
Our refugee officers are in the same division as our asylum officers. They're trained to do work the others do. And so what we've already done is have refugee officers assisting asylum officers, doing credible fear interviews, doing asylum cases themselves, carrying their own caseload. And you will see more of that continue into fiscal year 2020.
A number of evangelical groups are concerned about this new policy, including the humanitarian organization World Relief, which helps refugees resettle in the U.S. Matt Soerens, the U.S. Director of Church Mobilization at World Relief, joins us now. Matt, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Heather.
So, Matt, please put this new number into context for us. How does it compare with the number of refugees that we were settling 5-10 years ago?
Yeah, I mean, 5 or 10 years ago, the number would have been around 70 to 80,000. And that's a little bit down from the longer term historic norm. The average over the last 40 years has been about 95,000 refugees per year. So it's really a drop in the bucket compared to what the U.S. used to do. And that, for us, what's really heartbreaking is we know the individual faces and stories that those numbers are talking about. These are people persecuted, whether because of their Christian faith or their ethnicity, their political opinion. And far, far fewer of those individuals will be allowed to the United States next year unless the president changes his mind before signing this decree.
Right. I know a lot of people are thinking about those refugees who won't be able to come. The administration says that by cutting back on refugees, it can address problems at the southern border. Does that make sense to you? You also are very involved in asylum cases.
Yeah, I mean, our asylum process is really important, but they really are distinct processes, and they serve different populations. So we don't have a lot of persecuted Christians from Iraq or Syria or Iran or Burma showing up at the U.S.-Mexico border. And so to shut those people out on account of an increased number of people seeking asylum at the U.S.-Mexican border, many of whom are also Christians, but I also think it's a little disingenuous to pretend that that's being humanitarian when the administration's policies mean that the vast, vast majority of those asylum seekers at the U.S.-Mexico border are now going to be denied because of some changes in the last few months.
Is it true, though, do you think that by cutting back on the number of refugees that the U.S. can attend to more of these asylum claims?
I think we very well could do both. We did both in the 1980s when our refugee resettlement levels were much higher than they are being considered now under President Reagan. And at the same time, we were receiving large number of asylum seekers from El Salvador, from Guatemala, from Honduras. So in some ways, a parallel situation. We're a large country with the resources to do both. And if we do both well, eventually it will pay us back because we found over time, refugees who are resettled end up paying significantly more in taxes than the combined costs of any sort of assistance and costs to vet them and screen them and that sort of thing.
Matt, I want to ask you, the president also issued an executive order giving state and local governments the ability to say we don't want refugees in our community. How do you see that executive order playing out?
Yeah, I mean, it's very concerning to us because we want refugees to be able to go into the, just like they are lawfully admitted residents of the United States. So to have a particular standard that these particular groups of people can't live in the same communities for potentially with family members or friends. And because they're lawfully admitted, once they're resettled, they can move anywhere they want. We're not going to put up walls between states or between municipalities. But if they do so, which they're free to do, they're going to, leave a region where there might be the support of a local church or a settlement organization like World Relief to help them. So I'm actually really concerned that it's actually quite counter-effective to that goal of helping refugees to integrate and to be economically self-sufficient.
All right, Matt Soerens with World Relief, thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Heather.
In other news, President Trump is calling on House Intelligence Committee Chair Adam Schiff to resign from Congress. The president is upset over Schiff's parody of the phone call Mr. Trump made with the president of Ukraine. The phone call was the focus of a House hearing Thursday about a whistleblower report exposing alleged interference in the 2020 election. Schiff said he was making a parody of Trump's phone call, but his admission came only after Republicans questioned his actions. Here is a portion of Schiff's parody of President Trump talking to Ukrainian President Zelensky.
I have a favor I want from you, though. And I'm going to say this only 7 times, so you better listen good. I want you to make up dirt on my political opponent, understand lots of it. On this and on that.
No pressure.
President Trump tweeted up a firestorm. The president wrote, quote, Schiff fraudulently read to Congress with millions of people watching a version of my conversation with the president of Ukraine that doesn't exist. In another tweet, Mr. Trump said, quote, Adam Schiff therefore lied to Congress and attempted to defraud the American public. I'm calling for him to immediately resign from Congress based on this fraud. And Gary Lane has been following the story and says Republicans also took to Twitter to criticize Schiff. So, Gary, tell us, first of all, what are Republicans saying about this parody?
Well, they should have said, or they said that he should have said, that Schiff should have said that this was a parody before he read it. Now, in addition to that, they say it was unbecoming of a chairman of the House Intelligence Committee to do a parody while millions of people were watching and may not know what was in or not in this transcript of the president's phone call. But Heather, they said that if he wanted to do something about the phone call, he should have read the actual transcript and been truthful about that.
It was confusing listening to it.
Yes, it was.
Tell us the latest news about Joe Biden and Ukraine and why that's significant.
Well, it's significant because, as you know, latest polls show that Elizabeth Warren has taken the lead over Biden for the Democratic nomination for the presidency, and he's in trouble with this. It's not going to help him any to have this information come out. But what came out just last night, John Solomon of The Hill was on the Sean Hannity show. And what John Solomon said is his investigation uncovered an affidavit that was signed, a sworn statement, from the prosecutor in Ukraine that was fired, that Joe Biden had asked that he be fired. And his name is Shokin. And what Victor Shokin said is, look, I was told that when I was fired, the reason for me being fired had to do with Joe Biden, the vice president of the United States at the time, not being happy with the fact that I was investigating his son and his son involvement with a Ukrainian company called Burisma. And he received $50,000 a month for that. What is interesting in all of this, Heather, is Joe Biden claims that the whole thing was a matter of wanting to get this prosecutor fired because he was corrupt. But, of course, the Republicans and the president are saying, look, you're the one who was corrupt because you even bragged about getting him fired because he was investigating your son.
I'm sure we'll be hearing more about that.
Yes, we will.
The Schiff parody controversy may have overshadowed some testimony at yesterday's hearing. Acting Director of National Intelligence, Joseph McGuire, testified that it's bad for the nation to have outside interference in American elections. Do you see the president, his phone call, as an attempt at foreign influence?
Well, I mean, that's speculation at this point. Some people are saying, yes, it is. But look, I looked into this as well. What does the Federal Election Commission and the law say about this? And it says you cannot accept foreign donations for a campaign. The president is a declared candidate. So by soliciting this information from the president of Ukraine about Joe Biden and the investigation, was that a campaign donation? So that's kind of a gray area. Is it a donation? Well, when Congress wrote that law, they were looking at money being donated by foreign sources. Does information also count in this? But then you have to look at the fact that, well, the president didn't actually receive anything, hasn't received anything yet. So then is solicitation a violation of campaign finance law? Now, even if it is, you cannot indict a sitting president. We know that, okay? The Constitution does not allow that. But you can impeach him. And that's what's going on right now.
Yeah, right. Well, what do we know about polls, about American opinion on this right now?
50% of Americans in a Quinnipiac poll say they do not support impeachment and removal of this president. But it's interesting, Heather, the divide, the partisan divide. 73% of Democrats say they do support it. Only 4% of Republicans say they support it. It comes comes at a time when President Trump has greater popularity as far as his approval rating from the American public. 48% yesterday say they approve of his handling of everything, his presidency. That compares to about 44% for Barack Obama at this time in his presidency.
Okay. Well, very interesting. A lot of polarization and a lot more to come.
Yes, you're right.
Thank you, Gary.
Sure.
Well, we'll have more on this story and others this evening, of course, on Faith Nation, and you can watch it here on the CBN News Channel. A controversial Facebook post encouraging terrorism against Israel is taken down, but not by the social media giant. Fatah, the political party of Mahmoud Abbas, owned the page and its propaganda. CBN Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell has the story.
Palestinian Media Watch sounded the alarm recently in a 40-page report called the Fatah Facebook Terror Promotion Partnership.
We're finding is that Fatah uses this as its main social media means to send out its violent and hateful messages.
Director Itamar Marcus laid out in detail how Fatah not only was encouraging terror on Facebook, it also praised specific events of violence.
Omar Abu Layla murdered 2 Israelis in March of this year, within days of his being tracked down and killed by Israeli soldiers. Fatah on Facebook was calling him the perfect person.
According to Marcus, Fatah's page boasted 250,000 followers.
So Fatah is sending out its message to its youth in Arabic that they see Omar Abu Layla as a role model, as someone who they're supposed to be copying.
In March, Facebook sent Marcus a form letter, a response he calls inadequate.
They sent us back this beautiful letter. You may find this distasteful or offensive, but it doesn't violate our standards, so why don't you stop following them?
Marcus took action by starting a social media campaign against the page.
Thousands of people have mailed emails to the heads of Facebook. There have been complaints of specific items demanding that they remove this site, which promotes terror.
Then CBN News and other news organizations began making inquiries to Facebook. On Wednesday, the Facebook page suddenly shut down, with Fatah all but admitting its page broke Facebook rules against encouraging terrorism when its editor told the Times of Israel, "We decided to close it down for a period of time as a precautionary measure. We were worried that Facebook would shut it down permanently because of that Israeli organization's campaign and complaints against it."
Literally, they're waiting for the campaign. They're so upset and so afraid of our campaign that they're closing it.
Also on Wednesday, Facebook responded to CBN News after the site was closed. We received reports about potentially violating content on this page, and as we do with all such reports, are in the process of reviewing that content to determine whether it violates our policies. We did not, however, take the action that unpublished this page.
Facebook should just close it down and permanently, once and for all. Facebook has to stop looking for excuses, if they are, for Fatah, and they just have to close this down.
Still ahead, what group of voters one organization is targeting as we approach next year's elections. But before we go to break, here's a look at what's trending on CBNNews.com.
Remember for a moment what it was like to be a child. You believed every story you were told. You saw a world full of endless possibilities. What stories will the world's orphaned and at-risk children believe? We believe the Bible tells the only story truly worth believing. We believe that every child should have the opportunity to dream, the chance to take challenges and turn them into possibilities, the chance to stand on the promises of God, to recognize their place in the greatest story ever told. They have their whole lives ahead of them. Theirs is a world of endless possibilities. They are looking for a story to believe. We will tell them that story. Will you join us?
Latinos are playing a growing role in local and national elections. The Pew Research Center says that in last year's midterms, close to 1 in 10 voters was Latino. It's one reason why the National Hispanic Christian Leadership Conference has a campaign right now to focus Latinos on the issues of life, religious liberty, and biblical justice. Joining us now is the Reverend Tony Suarez, Executive Vice President of the conference, which oversees some 40,000 churches in the U.S. He's also one of the president's faith advisors. Pastor Tony, thanks for joining us.
Good to be back, Heather. Thank you for having me.
I want to ask you about the campaign, but first off, the president is cutting back on the number of refugees that the U.S. will admit next year. What are your thoughts on that?
I was recently at the McAllen Border Detention Facility and was able to speak with the Chief of Border Patrol. And unfortunately, this is just another issue that has evolved because of Congress's inaction. I'm pro-immigration reform. We have campaigned for immigration reform for a number of years, but Congress's inaction has led us to where we are today. There was a time when immigrants trying to cross our border without documentation did not want to be caught by Border Patrol. That's shifted. Now they intentionally are trying to be caught so that they can file an asylum claim. So our asylum system is so overwhelmed that the waiting period, even to have a hearing for asylum, is months and even years backlog. So when our government is now, limiting the number of refugees that come in, I think the United States is still a welcoming country to immigrants. I still believe that we want to receive those that are tired, those that need a place of freedom for religious liberty and freedom of the press and freedom of work and religion, just as we always have. But I think the system is so overwhelmed that we're in a place where the departments of immigration and homeland security feel like they have to put a cap on the number. Is it the best method? No, I wish it was different. I wish those numbers were higher for refugees to come in. But I continue to blame Congress that for over 3 decades have not passed immigration reform. And I think that's the key. I think if Congress would get to work and finally pass something on immigration reform, our concerns about refugee settlement would be alleviated right now.
Well, I know that we are all hoping that Congress will act. Your campaign to the Hispanic churches across the country is promoting life, religious liberty, and biblical justice, centering on immigration and racial reconciliation. Why are you focusing on these particular issues right now?
Because as Pastor Sam Rodriguez, the president of the NHCLC, has said since we were founded, our motive as Christians and as American citizens is to be focused on the agenda of the Lamb, not the agenda of the donkey or the agenda of the elephant. So we want our constituents, we want Hispanic evangelicals to remember that when you go to the polls, when you go to vote, you're not voting as a Republican, you're not voting as a Democrat, you're voting, number one, as a Christian, and number two, as an American citizen. So as a Christian, I have to reconcile what are the things that are the most important to me? What are the values that matter to me? Because I'm inundated with messages from social media and all the different streams of media on television, the radio and talk shows and whatnot. So when I go to the poll, I have all of that noise. But when we get to the polls, we want evangelicals to remember what are the issues that matter to us. It's life.
Just ask you just briefly, if I can, because we're about out of time. But the Pew Research Center says that the number of Latinos who voted in last year's midterm elections nearly doubled from the 2014 midterms. And I'm wondering, are you seeing growing numbers of Latinos who are politically engaged in voting?
I'm seeing growing numbers of Latinos and growing numbers of churches making sure to register Latinos so that they can vote their values, which is life, religious liberty, and biblical justice.
All right. Well, Reverend Tony Suarez, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
After the break, what is trending on faithwire.com? Stay with us.
Give me that. Bye. Sure, life is busy, but I found a way to make a huge difference in people's lives. I guess you could say I'm changing the world right here from home. I bring medical supplies and doctors to people in need, and dig wells so that villagers can have clean and safe water to drink. I make it possible to preach the gospel in over 100 countries, including right here in America. And when disaster strikes, I'm there, providing food, thank you, and emergency supplies to give people hope again. Every day, CBN and I are making the world a better place. Here you go. My life is hectic, so I joined CBN through Pledge Express. My bank does all the work, and I know that my gift is being used where it's needed most. So become a CBN partner and join Pledge Express, because you can do a world of good right from where you are. Hi, good morning. Are you ready to get started?
Hey, if you're tired and exhausted all day, you can't think clearly, and you really just need a cup or even a pot of coffee to get through your day, then join me, Dr. Josh Axe, for this new series where I'm going to teach you how to transform your diet and use essential oils and supplements to get a better night's sleep.
Get Protect Your Sleep and live your best life with innovative information from 5 leading sleep experts.
If you're not a great sleeper, you can do things to make yourself a great sleeper. If you're already a pretty good sleeper, you can enhance your sleep and be even better.
Discover a sleep-enhancing bedtime routine, how to put insomnia to rest, learn how to relieve pain that disturbs sleep, and much more in Protect Your Sleep.
Everything you do better with a good night's sleep.
Wake up to your best life. Call 1-800-700-7000 to get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
Don't miss out on this brand new series.
Well, here with trending stories from FaithWire, managing editor Dan Andros and CBN's Jessica Chaco.
Well, Justin Bieber encouraged his 119 million Instagram followers to join a guided prayer by friend and pastor Judah Smith. Here to tell us more, managing editor Dan Andros. Dan, we followed Justin on his spiritual journey for the last couple years, and it's been really powerful to watch him grow in his faith and also to become a positive influence, especially with these millions of Instagram followers.
Yeah, it really is something to watch, and we cover it every time he does something, because it really is remarkable to see somebody with, the history that he's had, kind of a sketchered recent history as a young star, falling into all the trappings of fame and fortune and all of that stuff, and to see him really leaning into his faith, in the midst of a culture that increasingly kind of pushes against that. It's great to see, so you should be praying for him. And oftentimes what we're seeing is really good stuff like this from his pastor, Judah Smith. And it was a guided prayer, and he encouraged everybody to follow along with it. And it was from 2 Corinthians 4:13. I'll read you the first part, which says, "For this light momentary affliction is preparing us for an eternal weight of glory beyond all comparison." And so he's talking about, obviously, various trials you may be going through at this time. He's been open, and we've covered this before, about his own mental health struggles, where he says it's hard to get out of bed in the morning at times. And so it's encouraging to see him leaning into God's word during this time. And so over at FaithWire, as well as you guys at CBN, we've been covering his journey, and we're praying for him as he goes along, considering for a whole bunch of reasons, but especially because of that big influence he has with so many followers.
Well, in other media news, Tom Hanks portrays the beloved television icon, Mr. Rogers, in the upcoming movie, A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. The film is said to put biblical values in the forefront. Dan, what more can you tell us about the film?
First of all, everyone seems excited about this film. Who didn't love Mr. Rogers growing up? I know I always dreamed of having one of those little trains that would come out of the wall. I don't know, all of my friends thought that was the coolest thing in the world, and my brothers, we really wanted that and asked my parents about 100 times for that, and of course never got it. But everybody loved Mr. Rogers, and of course everyone loves Tom Hanks, so that is a great fit right there. And so everyone's excited for this movie, and Christians should be excited because Fred Rogers was a person of faith, and this film is said to put faith and forgiveness at the forefront of the film. And so, and to take a look at how somebody, living out their faith can influence another person's life, as Fred Rogers often did. And the movie is coming out November 22nd. So mark that one down in your calendars. I think everybody's going to be excited to see this one.
Well, thanks, Dan. A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood comes to theaters November 22nd nationwide.
Up next, why a recent fire department academy graduation in New York City is extra special.
We will move the American embassy to the eternal capital of the Jewish people, Jerusalem.
As the nations rage, you can stand with Israel.
History is being written, and I want to be a part of it.
Call 1-800-700-7000 and get to life.
This is our nature as a country.
Discover the untold story of how Israeli volunteers are changing the world.
We consider it our duty to reach out and help others around the world.
For a gift of $10 or more, you can own the acclaimed CBN documentary To Life.
To treat a human, no matter what he is, which religious he have, which color he is, this is what I'm doing.
Support Israel in their time of need. Get to Life, now available on DVD. Call 1-800-700-7000 or log on to cbn.com.
And I wish that other people throughout the world could see this side of Israel.
Orphans Promise is committed to loving and serving at-risk children, to helping keep families together, and to creating opportunities for strong and sustainable communities around the world. We're working in over 60 countries around the world, and with your help, we can do even more. There's an old African proverb I love that says, if you want to run fast, run alone. But if you want to run far, run together. At Orphans Promise, we want to run far so we can touch the lives of as many orphaned and vulnerable children as possible. But we don't want to go alone. We're out to change the world, one child, one family, one community at a time. Will you join us?
A special graduation ceremony in New York City is warming hearts across the country. Among the 300 graduates into the New York City Fire Department on Tuesday were more than 20 children of firefighters killed on 9/11 or from a 9/11 related illness. This makes them the largest group of legacy graduates in department history. Fire Commissioner Daniel Negro said today these legacies are no longer children dreaming of their careers their father loved and of serving in the world's greatest fire department. Today, they have fully achieved their dreams. And that is it for this edition of CBN News Watch. We hope that you will join us next time. Have a great day.